and welcome to the Enchantress Society with Tia Johnson, a place where you get to be you, where you get to unlock your magic in a sacred and judgment-free zone. The Enchantress Society is your witchy sisterhood of enchanting women who guides and supports you along your spiritual journey from the mundane to the magical. I invite you to sit for a spell as I interview guests and spill the spiritual tea on how we can create the magical life we deserve. Hello, hello, hello. We have an amazing guest today, and I cannot wait to dive into this topic because I've experienced some amazing changes. I know you will, because Evelyn is a magician. I don't know. She has something. She's pretty awesome. So let's get to it. We will be discussing healing from childhood wounds and generational trauma with transformational life coach Evolve with Evelyn Huynh. And her website is evolvewithevelyn.com. No worries, because I'm going to put all of her social media and website info in the description of this episode so you can connect with her. Evelyn is a transformational, as I was mentioning, life coach that specializes in inner child and generational trauma healing. She helps people break through their fears, obstacles, and limiting beliefs so that they can achieve their wildest dreams. Through NLP, clinical hypnotherapy, and time techniques, Evelyn helps passionate leaders strengthen and heal their relationship with themselves and activate their own voice so that they can reclaim their power and step into the life they desire. Evelyn is a transformational... Oh, sorry. Let me just repeat it. That's an inside joke, guys. No
We're just on repeat.
Okay, so Evelyn's amazing. Check her out. Okay, she's here to help us heal and all that jazz. So Evelyn, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. So I talked a little bit about you in the previous episode. I don't know if you remember. Yes. So I don't know if you remember Lola from Summit of Slay, but she was my roomie at the Omni. And so we did a recap of the summit, and we talked about how you just flipped us upside down and healed us.
Oh my God, I did not know that. Now I'm like, I need to go check out that episode.
No worries, but that's just a testament of, who you are, the power of your work. And the story I gave was how first I wasn't going to go because I thought, I had a great childhood, which is going to lead me to my first question with you. So at first I thought, I had a great childhood. I don't have to go to, heal childhood wounds, but something said, go. And then Lola said, well, I'm going to go, let's check it out. So we go up there, and in your opening words, you said, even if you had a great childhood, this is for you. And I just felt that to the core, like, oh gosh, she got me. So I had to start there. And then when you led us through the guided meditation, like, oh my gosh. So later on that night, I heard the words, you're healed. And here's how I saw the physical manifestation of not just the information that you gave us, which the listeners will be learning about, but also the meditation you took us through. So I would think like, oh my gosh, if I go with a group of people, someone's going to leave me behind. Like it's going to happen, and I'm going to have to play it off because I'm an adult and I'm not supposed to show this fear. But as I was waiting for Lola, that didn't happen. Eventually she came out the elevator. I was just waiting for her. She was talking to some people, and she comes out the elevator eventually. And I just felt calm, cool, and collective. And I thought, holy shit, Evelyn, you healed something in me I didn't know needed to be healed. So my first question for you is, what are some of the things that you had to debunk? Because I know you debunked a huge one for me in your practice that people need to know, because I know people listening to this need it.
Yeah. Oh my God. First of all, thank you for sharing that. And I think, ever since I dabbled into this work, I mean, it was because like I was all sorts of fucked up and I didn't even know it. And that's
Hmm.
the precisely the problem, right? Like I don't know about you, but I was never taught mindset. I was never taught what
Right.
inner child or mental health was at school. Like we were taught like in math class, like, hypotenuse and mx plus 3 and all this shit that like literally
Right.
I'd never use in life. But then as I got older, going into creating my own business, even in my own fitness journey, like I was 197 pounds. I was suicidal when I was in high school. I self harmed. I was constantly in toxic relationships, like really bad relationships, had low self worth. Like I had so much trauma, but I didn't even know what trauma was, right?
Mm.
And looking back, it's like, oh, well, my parents are together. They're loving. I know that they love me. And I think that's where you resonated with me because we don't realize how much we suppress and also repress from childhood because the
Hmm.
number one thing that our subconscious mind does is that it wants to protect us. So it
Hmm.
actually represses memory with unresolved negative emotions. That's why we don't remember those not so great things. And so the only memories that we consciously remember are like, oh, it wasn't that bad. But when you really spend some time with childhood, you start to realize one, I actually don't remember much of my childhood before the age of 7. Two, why do I have all these self sabotaging behaviors? Why am I so
Hmm.
afraid of being left behind? Why am I so like, why do I always get FOMO? Why do I have to always feel like I need someone to validate me? Why am I so scared to do X, Y, and Z? Why am I so fearful to try new things? Like, we don't actually take the time to question why these things happen. We just live in it, right? So I kept
Hmm.
putting myself in toxic relationships. I kept fighting with the people around me. I was constantly scared of being left behind. And so I think the number one thing to debunk is like, we are all struggling so much when we actually don't have to. But a lot of
Mm.
us aren't allowing ourselves to actually come to terms with the fact that, wow, I might have had a great childhood and I might have also had childhood wounds as well. It doesn't have to be either or. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, and that's so important. And I love how you talked about our memory, because we
Right.
don't really remember much. We have these little maybe 60-second snippets of a memory, maybe, like I have a memory of being in a white dress at a wedding, like again, little snippets. So yeah, a lot of things happen to us over the years. And like you said, oh, it's not that bad. Oh, it's not that bad. And in, society, we don't it's like twofold. It's almost like we don't have enough time because some of us are in the hamster wheel, and then we're not having conversations with ourselves because for some people it's hard. I mean, it was hard for me. I ugly cry sometimes, it's not fun. But, a lot of these conversations and reflections aren't happening, and that's a bit unfortunate.
Oh, 100%. And I think, a lot of us had parents that escaped war, survived
Hmm.
communism, suffered through the recession, genocide, Holocaust, whatever it may be. And I think a lot of us lost our childhoods very, very young, especially those of us in the BIPOC community. Like when you
Hmm.
have family that, didn't originate in Northern America, there is a whole other layer of adversity that we've had to experience. So from a really young age, we've been in the survival mode, right? We've been
Hmm.
kind of like we were forced to grow up a lot earlier. And I think that's the thing is that a lot of us don't spend enough time with ourselves because we're always like just needing to survive, like focus on the next thing. And then because a lot of us have wounds and trauma, we will just stay busy to avoid those things. Like we'll numb ourselves to avoid that pain because we know that somewhere deep down, like, oh, there is a lot of stuff, but like, hey, I can like run by it. Like I can keep that in the past. Like I'll just shove all that stuff in the closet and never look at it.
Hmm.
And then we kind of dissociate a little bit, you know?
Right, absolutely. And I think more people need to learn more about who they are. One of the things that I really appreciated about your session was how you were just so comfortable with explaining who you are, explaining like,
Mm,
here's how I got to this point, even with the generational background of, like you were saying, what your parents had to deal with. I think that's so important because I know when I meet people, and I have friends of all different backgrounds, and sometimes they keep it a secret, not in a way of shame, but just like a protection because they have to be some like an extra person, I guess is what I'm saying, in society. So what are some tips you can give people to start getting more comfortable with their skin so they can begin to have these conversations with themselves?
Yeah, well, the first thing is actually to spend time with yourself. And I
Mm,
think you were just touching on this a little bit earlier. We don't give ourselves that time. We're constantly busy. I work with a lot of moms specifically, and especially when you're a mom or you have a dog and you're caring for another living being, it's so easy to put yourself second and put yourself even last sometimes. But like, I'll be honest with you, for the longest time, like I was not my own best friend. Like I was,
mm,
I hid under this mask of I'm an extrovert, and I was constantly around people. I hated doing things alone. I just couldn't, because I had such a messed up relationship with myself. I could not meditate. Like I got so much anxiety anytime I tried. It was almost like that stillness was so uncomfortable. I needed to be busy. I needed my life to be like stressful and chaotic because that's what was normal for me. I grew up in a very chaotic and stressful environment. And that's what
mm,
happens with like inner child and generational trauma. Like if you grew up in a stressful environment, or you had a stressful in utero environment, like while your mom was pregnant with you and she was stressed all the time, that's all you know to be. So being
mm,
alone and with yourself, that can be really uncomfortable. So I always recommend, like, one, go meditate. If that's uncomfortable for you, go and learn to do activities alone. Start small. Go on a walk by yourself. Go to the gym by yourself. Go and dance in your bedroom by yourself. It might be really uncomfortable at first, but it's just like a muscle. The more that you consistently do it, the easier that it becomes. So I went from being this person who hated being alone because I couldn't stand my own thoughts, to now I'm like, okay, I'm more of an extroverted introvert. Like I need my alone time because I realize like that's where my peace comes from. So I don't know if that
mm.
answers your question.
No, it completely does because what you are saying is, the best thing to do are the free things that people tend to skip. Go for the walk,
Yes.
sit with yourself. There are so many ways we can, tap into that portion of us till we get to that point where we're thinking, you know what? Screw all this extra stuff, this noise. Okay, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to get to the root of me. And
Mm-hmm.
then that person just becomes magnetic. Like for
Mm-hmm.
example, when you were in the room, I just automatically spotted you. Like it was just like, oh, Evelyn. And I thought, oh my God, you got to ask her if she wants to be on your podcast. Because you work so hard on yourself, it's just a higher frequency. And so
100%.
so what you were explaining, it resonates wholeheartedly. And I think that's part of the reason why now a lot of people aren't going back to their old jobs, because 2020 caused a lot of people to sit down in some
Oh
ways and
yeah.
think, yeah.
Well, here's the thing is that, like, I don't, I'm sure our parents are similar in the sense that, like, they grew up on this ideology and this belief that you could only be a doctor, a lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
government official, work your 9 to 5. And there's nothing wrong with any of those occupations. But, you and I grew up in this IT revolution. I study sociology. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
just had Instagram in 2009. Like, before that, social media wasn't even a thing. Like, I still
Mm-hmm.
remember when Facebook was in its like beta phases, and now
Right.
generations are growing up with social media. So there's an ample amount of opportunity that exists out there, and I think people are slowly starting to recognize that, like, there's a new way of, like, this new paradigm has been created, and the old paradigm is no longer working anymore, and people are either, like, they're faced with either, do I stick in this old paradigm, an old way of thinking and living and
Mm-hmm.
operating, or am I going to continue evolving and step into this new paradigm? And that's where we kind of see the tension right now, because there's a lot of people that are getting so shaken up that they're scared because all the ways that they knew how to operate and live are being shaken up, you know?
Hmm. Absolutely. And if you don't evolve, it's like you're going to be stuck in time and you're going to
Yes.
see so many other things around you speed up. So, yeah, that was a huge concern for me, which is why I'm so glad that, personal growth is becoming more of a thing now, because the last thing I want for anyone is to be stuck in a situation because they didn't have a conversation, like that deep conversation with themselves.
Well, and exactly what you're saying. And that's why so many people still struggle. Like suicide rates have gone up the ass within the last 2 years, especially with
Mm,
this pandemic. And there's
yeah.
really little to no support for people mentally and emotionally. That's why I always say, like, people are struggling more than they have to because they are not given these tools. And that's why, one of my main goals is I love speaking and I love being in front of like so many people and sharing this work because that can create a ripple effect. Because with you coming to someone to say like thank you for Jamie for having me there, like her choosing to
Hmm.
have me there and then me speaking in front of like 50 to 70 people, you being one of those many now started
Hmm.
sharing about this on your podcast, which is now creating a ripple effect of more people being aware of this. And that's
Hmm.
where we get to create that ripple effect of healing. But it's like, why are we not teaching this from where it starts, like the
Right.
education system, you know?
Absolutely. And it's really sad because so much time is spent indoors and it's not even made to be pleasing to the senses. Like if we had to be indoors for 8 hours a day, why can't it at least be colorful and welcoming and inviting so you want to learn? Because just like you were saying, a lot of things that we learn don't apply in our lives. And I remember now the teacher saying, you're not going to have a calculator with you when you're out in the real world. Now look at us. It's just like, okay. Um,
Oh God.
I know it's crazy. So, what are some of the questions, or even a question you wish more people would ask you about, the healing the childhood wounds, or even dealing with generational trauma?
Oh, that's a really great question. What questions do I wish more people ask me of? Um, Honestly, the first thing is I just wish more people ask questions. The common
Mm,
questions that I get is, and the people who kind of like resonate with my content, they'll be like, okay, well, I hear what you're saying, Evelyn. How do I want to remember things from my childhood, but I don't know how. And that's a really great question. But I
mm,
think if I could have it my way, people would just make it second nature to ask questions. Because that is precisely the
mm,
problem, TL, is that people don't ask questions. And it started from a really young age, right? We're in class and we don't want to be singled out. So no one raises their hands to ask anything. And maybe you did. And then everyone laughed at you. So then you learned from a really young age that you got to suppress your voice and that you can't ask things. And then, like, people are so fucking afraid to ask questions because they're so afraid of judgment and rejection.
mm,
And I really learned this, I want to say, a couple of years ago. So prior to, in between, while I was starting my business, I was something called a brand ambassador. So I was working for multiple marketing companies and I represented over 70 different brands. I marketed Mercedes, Volkswagen, Smirnoff, like major brands. And I was kind of the face of the brand, like the girl that you would see giving out free t-shirts and
mm,
educating you on the brand. And I will be honest, within those 2 years, I'm pretty sure I heard no and rejection over 5,000 times. Because when you're spending 12 hours a day asking people if they want a free t-shirt, like maybe a small percentage of people actually be yes. Everyone will be like, no, thanks. Some people were nice and some people were totally like assholes to me. But I think from that conditioned me to being like, it's okay to ask questions. And the worst thing that someone can say is no. And at least
right.
then you can say that you've tried. But in this day
Hmm.
and age, so many people are too afraid. So they won't ask questions if they need something. They won't ask questions
Hmm.
if they're confused about something. They won't ask questions if they need clarity on something. And that is the problem.
Oh man, that was so powerful. And I was thinking of so many scenarios where I have seen that happen, where, people rather do extra work than to just be direct. And being direct has been, what's the word I'm looking for? Not a dirty word, but it's now being taken as a form of disrespect now. And it goes back to, being in school where we are told, be nice, be polite. It's almost ingrained to be overly concerned about feelings. Sometimes people need tough love, or sometimes you're just direct because maybe you don't like something. And that gets taken as, oh, well, you're a hater, or oh, how dare you. So now people don't want to ask questions. And when they do, they don't want to be direct sometimes because they don't, as you said, they don't want to be singled out. They don't want to look weird or crazy. But the thing is, the people who have become wildly successful, they look crazy, especially in the beginning. They're doing all these things to put them in a position to where they want to be. And I believe that people look at it with a nearsighted perspective as opposed to the far side, like the full picture. Ask questions now, get a little bit uncomfortable now, so you won't have these wounds and traumas, going into the next decade, and then unfortunately your children.
Mm-hmm. And like through generational trauma, and what we learn is that traumas can be passed down. So if you've lived your entire life suppressing your voice because you're afraid of speaking up and afraid of what people will say, you are literally passing that on to your children, right? Your children are going to mimic exactly what you do. So if you're afraid to speak up for yourself and your children grow up watching you step down when your husband or your partner is abusing you or stepping all over you, and they just see you constantly like step down and kind of like hide away, what are they going to know to do? Oh, well, if mom does that or dad does that, then I guess it's okay for me to like step down. And now we're creating generations of people who are not willing to stand up for themselves. And that's the problem that we're seeing now, right? There's so much oppression going on. There's so much like control, and people behind the scenes are very loud, right? To their friends and their family. They're like, oh, I don't believe in this and this is the blah, blah, blah. But then when it comes time for them to actually speak up, they'll rather just like hide and not
Right.
say anything. And that, I think, creates so much damage, because that is what creates disempowerment. And as human beings, when we're disempowered, we do some fucked up shit.
Yes, it's like all humanity within goes out the window.
Yes, exactly. But it's like, if you just learn to, and the way that I think of it is maybe less about being like, oh, I have to be direct, and more about just being honest. Because if we're truly just honest, right? Honesty hurts sometimes, and that's okay. And I always say honesty, but what comes from the heart goes to the heart. And this happens in every area of life. Like, we are so afraid to ask our partners for what we need because we're afraid of what they're going to say. But there's a difference between being like, hey, babe, I really miss you. And I'm just like, I need some time to like cuddle with you because I just haven't seen you all day, versus like, you never spend any time with me. There is a difference, right? We're not being honest. So then when we actually think that we're asking for something, it becomes more of a fucking command and blame than it actually comes from being like, hey, I just really miss you, you know?
Wow. Yes, that was so powerful. What a great example. You're right. Because I need to mask my emotions because I don't want to look weak and vulnerable and all that.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And that's why I'm so glad that you're here. And so another thing that blew my mind during your session was how you explained how generational trauma gets passed down, even when our parents are in our grandmother's belly. Can you talk about
Yeah.
that? Because I thought that was just mind blowing.
Yeah. Okay. So for everyone who's listening right now, I just want you to close your eyes for a second. And I just want you to envision like a cartoon picture of your grandma who is pregnant, and while she was 5 months pregnant with your mom, so the baby that's inside of your grandma's belly, The precursor cell of the egg that you developed from was present in your mom's ovaries, which means that the three of you guys, your grandma, your mom, and you, shared the same biological environment at one point in time. So what that means is that, let's say if you're like me and your grandma lived in communist Vietnam, or she was in a war-torn country, or she grew up in an underdeveloped country, and maybe your grandpa was drinking all the time, or your grandpa was cheating, or you guys were struggling financially. That stress that your grandma was experiencing directly that trauma can be passed down to your mom, which then you can inherit. So through epigenetics, we've learned, and this is generational trauma, ancestral trauma, inherited family trauma. They're really all the same thing. And it's the basis that we can inherit the biological residues from the traumatic events in our family history. And trauma can vary in types and intensities. It doesn't always have to be big things like murder, suicide, rape. It could really be as simple as, wow, grandma was just really stressed all the time, and chronic stress. That can be, trauma. And so the idea behind that is that in our DNA, we are always talking about something called chromosomal DNA, which is like you and I having similar hair color as our parents, and, physical traits like eye color, skin color, that. But that's actually only 2% of our total DNA. The other 98% is what we call non-coding DNA. And that's actually our personality traits, our behaviors, our characteristics, emotional traits. So those are the things that can be passed down. And this non-coding DNA can be influenced and affected by environmental stressors, toxins, inadequate nutrition. So you could see even the tiniest of things that affect even up to our grandma can be passed down to us. So what this means is that this trauma that we've inherited, we can, if we're not put in the best, I guess, like most emotionally safe environment, that trauma can, I guess, like be birthed, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
So studies have shown that if one of our parents experience PTSD, then we are actually 3 times more likely to experience the symptoms of PTSD, like depression and anxiety. So I hope that made sense. I'm like, I kind of just threw a lot of words out there.
No, it was making a lot of sense because, excuse me, I was thinking about when my grandmother was born, 1937. So this is just a few years after the Great Depression. So I know as a child, she picked up on some things from her parents. And I can only imagine growing up, the thought process with money. She was one of 5 kids, and, pregnant with my mom. So I can only imagine. And I have the wheels turning in my mind right now because I know I used to have this feeling of, I need to keep money on me in case I need to leave the country. I can't tell you where that feeling came from, but for the longest, I even remember as a young kid and even early adult, I would tell my papa, yeah, and then I would go live in Switzerland. Like, I don't know why I picked Switzerland, but I just had this all mapped out. And it's funny because I have no reason to think, oh, I need to keep this money. I don't want to, I don't want to spend anything, even though I know I need to spend the money for something. But what if I need it? Like, what if I need to go somewhere? What if I need that? So that's really interesting.
That literally proves just how deep this shit goes.
Right? Crazy. Right? And
yeah.
Oh, you go ahead.
No. I was just, while you're talking about this, like, financial trauma is one of the major things that we see getting passed down. Like, I think studies have shown that, I can't remember the number, but I think it was like a really big percentage of millennials actually have inherited financial trauma, especially due to the recession that our parents experienced. So the financial trauma gets passed down. And literally what you shared, I mean, I've never had the thought of like, okay, I need to keep money in case I need to leave the country. But, one of my grandparents, because of living in communist Vietnam, the government owns everything. So when North Vietnam took over South Vietnam and it became a communist state, they actually met up with they set up a meeting with my grandpa, which my grandpa thought, it's cool. Like, we're just going to have a talk about business. That was the last time that my family saw him for 12 years. They took his business, took all of his money, shoved him behind bars, and that was
Wow.
that. And for most of my life, I mean, I've been working since I was 13. I was a babysitter. And at 16 years old, I was actually working at a leather store, and it was a commission-based job. So I was 16 years old in high school, working close to 30 hours a week. I was selling $900 leather jackets, probably made more than most 16-year-olds would. And yet I never, ever could keep my money. Even when I was in business, and I was
Mm-hmm.
having like $50,000 launches and multiple six-figure years, I
Mm-hmm.
have never had a savings account. I literally could not tell you why. It felt like I never had anything to show for it. And it wasn't until I started doing generational trauma work that I was like, holy shit, I've had this subconscious self-sabotaging behavior, because subconsciously I believe that if I don't spend all my money, someone is going to take it away, just like what they
Mm,
did to my grandpa.
mm. Look at that. Mm.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone
You and I are just
listening,
like,
I know we just like, so everyone listening, y'all have homework. All right. So check all, if unfortunately your grandparents aren't around, ask your parents, as your aunties, your uncles, start asking around. And I will say this. So I also started asking my uncle. So out of my grandmother's siblings, there are only two now that are still living. And I was asking my uncle about just the family history. And what I also learned was that there are a lot of my family members who have served in the military. And my mom, she was a civilian in the military. So it's just, I come from a strong military family as well. So, it's really important to understand that, because it gives even more insight into who you are and your interests, and also pretty much your fears, as we've been talking about. Start asking yourself, why do I feel this way? And I don't have a reason to. Most likely it's generational
100%.
trauma.
Yeah. I would say 9 times out of 10. Like, I've been a personal trainer, a fitness coach, business coach, and anytime 100% of the clients who I've worked with that have had challenges or struggles of any kind, 100% it's been boiled back down to inner child wounds, which come from generational trauma. So the two go hand in hand together.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So when you led us through that meditation, and so Lola and I were cracking up because it started to thunderstorm and everyone thought that was part of the meditation music. We all loved it, but when we went outside after the break, like, oh shit, and that was actually thundering outside. But it was so perfect. I can't even talk. I had these brackets on the back of my teeth, and I'm sorry, it's just perfect. There we go. I have a Philly accent, a South Philly accent, brackets on the back of my teeth, and I'm trying to pronounce words right. Like, water is water. I pronounce it WOODER. So it's never going to be perfect English ever. So it was perfect. And what I saw was my 4-year-old me when I was going to the academy, and I had on my red outfit, and the little version of Tia ran up to me, gave me a hug, and she told me, remember when you thought you can do it all, and you did, because you played a lot in between, and that's why you were able to do it all. You're not playing enough. Like, you got to get back to that, and then you can do it all. And that made me teary-eyed, because I was the kid in class who doodled. I still paid attention, but I doodled. Like, I always had this huge creative side, always wanting to daydream, and I haven't been doing that as much, but I also didn't realize that. So I had to do even more check-ins with myself than I realized. And so I'm saying that because it really ties into what you talk about, that discovering your soul purpose and activating your voice. So how do you stay aligned so that way your soul purpose is intact, and you aren't turning your voice down in different situations.
Yeah. Wait, sorry, you cut off for a second. Did you ask what do I do?
Oh yeah. So what do you do to keep yourself centered so that way your sole purpose is intact, and then you also don't turn your voice down in different situations?
Yeah. Okay. So I this is an amazing question. And I think sometimes it's so easy for us to like, oh, like this worked for Tia, this worked for Evelyn, and then people try to recreate it. So I just want to put a disclaimer out there. Anything that we share on here, take it with a grain of salt. There's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be something that works better for you. So take what resonates, shift it if you need to. But what works for me might not work for you. And if it doesn't, that's great. But I think sometimes we actually hold ourselves back because we try to follow someone else's exact plan and then it doesn't work for us. And then we think, well, I'm a failure. This is not going to work for me. So as a coach myself, I will tell you what's worked for me. And then I'll also help you kind of make the tweaks that you need so that it works better for you. So I will say, something that I believe is a non-negotiable for also it's 444 right now. So I feel like spirit is like, this is what they need to hear. So a non-negotiable that I believe is for every single person. When you wake up, being intentional about your morning routine, whatever that looks like for you. If you're a mom, maybe that's going to be like 10 minutes. If maybe you're an entrepreneur, you have a little bit more time, maybe that'll be an hour. So that time is relative to your lifestyle. In this morning routine, what's really important is that within the first hour of your day, and if you're a mom, it might just be like the first half hour. Do not touch your phone. Refrain from touching your phone. Focus on you before you touch your phone. This is the time when our subconscious mind is the most impressionable, right? So the information that you are coming across will literally be programmed straight to your subconscious mind. And that's how the rest of your day goes. Haven't you ever noticed that when you start your day looking at social media, all of a sudden it's almost like you're just cranky the rest of the day. You feel like shit about yourself. But those moments where you wake up, you like maybe go slow, you like put on like some good music, you drink your coffee, maybe you go on a walk or go to the gym, and then all of a sudden you feel like a boss bitch and you're like, I got this. That's why. So one, refrain from using your phone right when you wake up. Go and do something for you. So for me, I really love to like pull oracle cards or tarot cards. I will sit in meditation. I might even like go work out before I touch my phone. And then I give myself like a good 30 minutes to hour where it's just Evelyn, like me, myself, and I. Like me, myself, and I with no outside influences. And this is even if you're living with a partner, like your partner does not get you at this time. It's you. Like you walk into a different room or you get them to go to a different room. So that's like number one, because that is where you actually connect with yourself. Right? Because at every other moment of every other day, we are giving ourselves to other people. We're giving ourselves to social media. We're giving ourselves to our client, to our employer, to our business, our parents, our kids, our spouse. We have no time for ourselves. So morning routine is number one. And then number two, which honestly I need to do a better job of, is your nighttime routine, right? Same thing. That hour before bed, try to not be on your phone. I actually charge my phone away from my bed and not be on social media. Utilize that time to, read a book, watch like a documentary, or watch something that excites you, or listen to a podcast, or do whatever it may be. But the morning and the night, right before and after bedtime, that needs to be you time.
Yes, I do very similar things. I open up my window, get fresh air, which I'm loving now because it's early September, that early fall breeze. I brew coffee, and I bought the Freak Ritual product. So I have my oil that I put in there and my coffee.
Yes.
And I spray that mist, and I sit with my thoughts for a while. Sometimes I'll play music. Sometimes I have motivational, stuff on YouTube or something like that. But I do enjoy a nice, casual, easy morning. At nighttime, I'm a night owl. So, that varies, depending on the full moon and all that jazz. So yeah, that is so important. I'm so glad that you touched on both the nighttime and daytime rituals. Yes.
Ooh, and journaling. That I forgot to miss up
Mm,
probably the most important piece, because thoughts are great when we're just spending time with it, but actually getting our thoughts out from our brains and out in the
mm,
open. So whether that's
mm-hmm,
you writing it down, so I write it down and I also need to talk it out. So in my best states, I will be outside in nature and I will literally, I look like a crazy person, but I will just talk to trees. I will just talk out loud, because we don't realize how many downloads and how healing it is to get the
mm-hmm.
things out of your brain, out just in the open. So I'll actually even turn on my voice note, like my audio recording, and I'll just record myself. Not going to share it anywhere, but it's just for me, myself, and I.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Love that. So I know we covered a lot, but any final words?
Oh, dude, the final words that I say is just like, you're so fucking enough. Like, you are
Mm-hmm.
enough as you are. You are a magical human being with everything that you have ever experienced. I know that for some of you, it might be so easy to want to run away from your past because maybe you've experienced some not so great things, but our past, our family history, and everything we've ever experienced, the great, the good, the bad, and the ugly, is what makes us who we are today. And we cannot be proud of who we are and move forward with our lives if we don't own and accept all parts of us. So
Mm-hmm.
if that's you, just know that you're not broken, you're enough, and you have everything that you need to succeed. And I love you.
Whew, I love that. That was a sermon. Thank you. Love that. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. So many great nuggets. People have homework to do now. Love it. Thank you again. Everyone
Oh,
listening, I'm sending you lots of love, many blessings. You know, I'm rooting for you. Be kind to yourself. Until next time.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning in, Magical One. Let's keep in touch. Join the VIP email list by going to tiamariejohnson.com. And as always, I'm sending you lots of love, many blessings. I'm rooting for you. And remember to be kind to yourself. Until next time.